Starlight Stories presents Hazard Pay. The first thing you should know about monsters is that the government lies about them. Not always maliciously. Sometimes the official who tells you that the 7-meter carnivorous apparition in your cargo hold is an unresolved sensor artifact sincerely believes it. Sometimes the official has spent 26 years processing navigational anomalies and cannot emotionally survive the discovery that shadows occasionally grow teeth. Other times, the government lies because admitting monsters exist would require funding a department to deal with them. That was where we came in. My name is Jack Mercer. I was formerly a fusion plant maintenance supervisor, briefly a prisoner on a Varelian customs station, and, at the time this story began, the newest field operative of Hazard Containment Solutions. Our company motto was, "There is no such thing as a monster. Sign here." The second line appeared on all our contracts. My first assignment took me to Astery Space, where the architecture was beautiful, the people were beautiful, and something had eaten 16 maintenance workers without leaving so much as a bloodstain. Naturally, our briefing described the situation as routine. "Routine," I said. My supervisor, Frank Dugan, leaned back in the acceleration couch across from me. He was a wide, gray-haired human with a scar running from his forehead to the corner of his mouth. He wore combat armor that had been repaired so many times it was mostly repair. "Routine," he agreed. Beside him, Pellis Thray's bioluminescent veins turned a skeptical amber. Pellis was Varelian, tall, narrow, sea-green, and elegant enough to make a crane look clumsy. His two sensory crests lay flat against the back of his skull beneath a modified helmet. He had 4 long fingers and a thumb on each hand, and he could manipulate a sensor array with the precision of a concert pianist. He hated firearms. He carried 6. Across the troop compartment, Mara Vin checked the power cell in her pulse rifle. Mara was Astery. Silver skin, dark eyes, features designed by generations of genetic artists who believed asymmetry was a moral failing. Her movements were controlled and economical, and her expression suggested she had examined the universe carefully and found several errors in its construction. "The term routine is statistically indefensible," she said. Frank nodded. "That's why it's in the briefing." Our shuttle rattled as it entered the atmosphere of Nethra. Below us, the planet was a smooth green jewel. Pale oceans shone between narrow continents. White cities curved along coastlines like shells laid carefully upon velvet. The Astery had colonized Nethra 80 years earlier. There were no major predators, no tectonic instability, no toxic vegetation, no hurricanes, volcanoes, radiation belts, carnivorous fungi, or local equivalent of mosquitoes. To an Earthborn human, it looked suspicious. "Beautiful planet," I said. Frank grunted. "Worst kind." Pellis looked at him. "You consider dangerous planets preferable?" "No. I consider honest planets preferable." The shuttle descended toward an isolated research complex near the Northern Sea. From the air, the facility resembled a silver flower. 6 laboratory wings radiated from a central dome. A matter beam tower rose on one side, its transmission rings glowing faintly blue. Beyond it stood a cluster of habitation buildings and a landing field surrounded by emergency lights. No one waited for us. That was the first bad sign. The second was the row of unattended ground vehicles parked beside the administration building, their doors open. The third was the thing crawling along the underside of our shuttle. Pellis noticed it first. His sensory crests snapped upright. Movement on the hull. Mara looked at the tactical display. The exterior sensors show nothing. The shuttle lurched. Something scraped across the armor above us. It sounded like a steel hook dragged slowly over a coffin. Frank unbuckled his restraints. "Helmets." The shuttle pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Containment team, remain seated. We are experiencing atmospheric turbulence." Frank put on his helmet. "So's the atmosphere." I sealed mine and pulled my rifle from the rack. It was a human-built M88 coil carbine, designed during the brief but educational conflict with the Carvax. It fired tungsten penetrators at velocities considered excessive by 7 Federation treaties and insufficient by the people who had actually fought Carvax. Frank had issued it to me 2 days earlier. "You know how to use one?" he had asked. "I grew up in Montana." He accepted that as a complete answer. Now I thumbed the weapon live. The cockpit door folded inward. Not opened. Folded. The metal bent into the passenger compartment as though struck by a giant fist. The pilot screamed. A shape reached through the gap. I saw a hand. At least, my mind called it a hand because the alternative was admitting I had no category for what I was seeing. It had 6 black fingers, each too long, each joint bending in a different direction. The surface wasn't skin. It looked like darkness had condensed into something wet and muscular. The fingers closed around the co-pilot. Mara fired first. Her pulse rifle spat a line of blue-white energy. The hand recoiled, leaving a groove of frost across the bulkhead. The co-pilot vanished through the door. His scream ended outside the shuttle. "Emergency landing," Frank shouted. The pilot did not answer. Pellis lunged into the cockpit. His long body folded through the damaged doorway. The shuttle banked hard, throwing me against the restraints I had not had time to release. The world outside spun. "See, sky, research complex. See again." Pellis took the controls. "I have partial authority," he called. "Partial?" I asked. "The remaining control surfaces disagree with me." Another impact struck the hull. Frank drew a heavy pistol from his thigh holster. "Jack, rear hatch." "What's at the rear hatch?" Hopefully nothing. There was something at the rear hatch. The metal bulged inward. I braced my rifle. The bulge moved, slowly at first, as if whatever was outside were testing the material. Then 6 narrow points punched through. They peeled the hatch apart. A face appeared in the opening. It had once belonged to the co-pilot. His eyes were open. His mouth stretched far wider than human anatomy permitted. Darkness pulsed inside his throat. "Don't shoot him," I shouted. Frank shot him. The heavy round hit the co-pilot in the forehead. His head snapped back, then rotated slowly forward again. "Jack," Frank said, "you'll learn." The thing wearing the co-pilot opened its mouth. Something black uncoiled from inside him. I fired. The M88 slammed against my shoulder. Tungsten rounds tore through the corpse, punched through the creature behind it, and disappeared into the sky. For half a second, I saw our attacker clearly. It clung to the hull on 4 backward-jointed limbs. Its body was long and thin, like a starved animal stretched on a rack. Black membranes fluttered along its sides. Its head had no eyes, only a vertical mouth filled with pale hooked structures. The rounds shredded its torso. It fell away. Frank looked at me. "See, the shuttle hit the landing field. There are graceful emergency landings. Pilots sometimes describe them in interviews afterward, usually while accepting medals. Ours involved a communications mast, 3 cargo containers, and an ornamental reflecting pool. The shuttle skidded sideways through the water, sheared off its landing gear, and stopped with its nose buried in a sculpture representing social harmony. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Pellis's voice came from the cockpit. "I have landed." Frank released his restraints. "Put it in the report." We climbed out through the torn rear hatch. The air smelled faintly of flowers and hot metal. Water from the reflecting pool steamed around the shuttle. One wing had embedded itself in the sculpture. Mara studied the wreckage. "The sculpture was commissioned by my aunt." Frank looked at it. "Tell her the monster did it." "You were piloting," I said to Pellis. His veins glowed a defensive blue. The sculpture was positioned irresponsibly. The research complex stood silent around us. No workers. No emergency crews. No security. A warm wind came off the sea, moving through the ornamental grasses. Somewhere inside the central dome, an alarm chimed at long, polite intervals. Frank opened a channel. "Hazard Team 4 to Nethra Research Control. We are on site. Respond. Static." Then a woman whispered, "Do not use the matter beam." The transmission cut out. Frank looked at Mara. She was already checking the signal. "Local source," she said. "Habitation Wing 3. We moved." Frank took the lead. Mara followed. Pellis carried the sensor package, and I watched our rear. I had received a total of 11 days of monster hunting training. The first 4 covered weapons. The next 3 covered first aid. 1 day covered interspecies exorcism, which consisted mostly of knowing which species became offended when sprayed with salt. The remaining 3 days covered liability. According to company policy, I was fully qualified. We crossed the landing field and entered the administration building through an unlocked door. Inside, everything was clean. That bothered me more than blood would have. Desks stood neatly arranged. Holographic displays floated over workstations. Cups of tea had gone cold. A child's drawing had been attached to one partition, a silver-skinned family beneath a blue sun. There were no signs of violence. No bodies. No people. Pellis swept the room. Residual matter beam activity. How much? Mara asked. Thousands of transmission events. Frank examined one of the workstations. Destination? Pellis's throat veins dimmed. None. That got everyone's attention. Matter beams converted physical objects into information, transmitted that information through a controlled channel, and reconstructed it elsewhere. No destination meant no reconstruction. Could the logs be damaged? I asked. Mara's face tightened by perhaps half a millimeter. On an asteroid, that was panic. The logs are accurate. Frank turned slowly, studying the empty room. Something beamed the staff out. Where? I asked. Pellis looked toward the ceiling. Not where. Out of what? A sound came from the corridor. A wet clicking. Frank raised one fist. We spread out. The clicking moved closer. A figure stumbled around the corner. An asteroid man wore a torn laboratory coat. His silver skin had gone gray. Both hands were held over his mouth. Mara lowered her weapon slightly. Dr. Selen? He looked at her. Tears ran between his fingers. Mara, he whispered. She stepped forward. Frank caught her shoulder. The scientist's abdomen moved. Something pressed outward beneath his clothing. Dr. Selen screamed. His jaw split open to the ears. A black limb punched through his chest. We fired together. Energy bolts and coil rounds tore the corridor apart. The scientist's body lifted from the floor, driven backward by the impacts. The creature inside him unfolded as the flesh around it collapsed. It was smaller than the one on the shuttle. Newborn, I thought. That was not a comforting thought. It sprang onto the wall. Pellis fired 2 pistols. Mara hit it with a pulse burst. Frank's shotgun-like plasma projector filled the corridor with orange fire. The creature dropped, smoking. Its limbs continued to twitch. I stared at the dead scientist. Mara, she stood perfectly still. He supervised my graduate research, she said. Frank's voice softened. I'm sorry. Her eyes remained on the body. So am I. Then Dr. Selen's hand moved. I brought up my rifle. The hand opened. Something small rolled from his palm. A data crystal. Mara retrieved it. A pre-recorded message appeared above her wrist unit. Dr. Selen's face shimmered into view, alive and composed. If you are seeing this, the recording said, the containment protocol has failed. Frank sighed. They always say that. We discovered the structure beneath the Northern Sea 17 days ago. It was not constructed by any known civilization. Initial dating suggests it predates the asteroid settlement by at least 2 million years. The recording displayed an image of a black geometric object buried beneath the seabed. It resembled a gate. Not a door. A gate. The kind built by something expecting armies. We believed it was an Avarn relic, Selen continued. Its material composition matched fragments recovered from several causality sites. We activated it using the matter beam array. Pellis made a soft sound of dismay. What? I asked. An Avarn probability instrument, he said. They connected it to a device that turns reality into data. Scientists, Frank muttered. Selen's image continued. The structure does not transport matter. It transports possible matter. Organisms that might have evolved. Predators that almost existed. Parasitic forms eliminated by extinction events. Biological outcomes rejected by history. The recording flickered. We opened a channel to unrealized life. I looked at the burned creature on the floor. So it's an imaginary monster. Frank checked his weapon. Looks real enough. The entities lack stable existence in our universe, Selen said. They anchor themselves through living nervous systems. Once anchored, they can propagate through matter beam networks. Every connected transmitter is now at risk. Mara stopped the recording. Nethra's beam network connects to 38 inhabited worlds. Frank's expression went flat. Can they travel through a disabled array? No. Then we shut it down. The main controls are in the central dome, Mara said. A low pulse rolled through the building. Every light turned red. A female voice spoke over the facility system. Beam synchronization begins in 18 minutes. Pellis checked the sensor pack. Automated transmission cycle. Destinations? I asked. His veins flared bright orange. All 38 worlds. Frank keyed his comm. Team 4 to ship. Emergency quarantine authorization. Destroy the beam tower. No response. He tried again. Static. Then a voice answered. Frank. It sounded like a little girl. Frank froze. Daddy. His face changed. I had known him 12 days. I had seen him laugh, curse, eat a pepper hot enough to hospitalize a Varelian, and explain how to shoot a revenant through a wall. I had never seen fear. Now I did. The voice came again. Daddy, it's dark. Frank's daughter had been dead for 19 years. I knew because company personnel files were not as secure as the company believed. Not her, Mara said quietly. Frank lowered his head. The corridor lights flickered. At the far end, a child appeared. Human, 8 or 9 years old. Red hair, blue nightdress. She held out one hand. Daddy. Frank raised his plasma projector. His arms shook. The girl smiled. Her mouth opened vertically. Frank fired. Fire filled the corridor. The thing screamed in several voices at once and vanished into the walls. Frank stood in the fading heat. Nobody spoke. Finally, he looked at me. Monsters use what's inside you. I nodded. What do they use against someone with no unresolved emotional trauma? Mara looked at me with serene seriousness. Such a person would be psychologically abnormal. Fair. We headed for the central dome. The deeper we went, the more the building changed. Walls sweated black fluid. Doorways stretched when we approached. Rooms appeared where the facility map said solid foundations should be. Once, we passed a window looking out over an endless red plain beneath 3 moons. Pellis refused to look through it. It is not real, he said. Something enormous moved across the plain. Not looking seems reasonable, I agreed. At the junction outside the dome, we found the survivors. 7 Astery scientists had barricaded themselves inside an equipment room. With them were 3 Varelians, 2 humans, and a maintenance robot that insisted on sweeping the floor despite the apocalypse. The woman who had warned us over the comm was Dr. Lysandra Vale. She was Astery, but unlike Mara, her composure had cracked completely. Her silver hair hung loose. Blood stained one sleeve. She held a laboratory cutter like a knife. You came, she said. Frank looked around the room. We're expensive, but reliable. The central chamber is infested, she said. The entities are using the gate as a stabilizing anchor. Destroying the beam tower will prevent transmission, but it will not close the breach. How do we close it? Mara asked. Lysandra looked toward the dome. Someone must enter the control chamber and manually reverse the matter stream. Remote access? Pellis asked. Compromised. Robotics. The entities infest active computational systems. The maintenance robot bumped into my boot. Pardon me, it said. I looked down. A black tendril slid from beneath its chassis. I kicked it across the room. The robot hit the wall and exploded into a mass of hooked limbs. Everyone opened fire. Afterward, Frank brushed burning metal from his shoulder. Add housekeeping equipment to the hostile list. Dr. Vale stared at me. How did you know? I didn't. It touched my boot. She blinked. Humans from DNA worlds had a reputation across the galaxy. Stronger, faster, harder to poison, more resistant to injury. What aliens did not always appreciate was that Earth had also given us a deep and unreasonable distrust of anything behaving oddly near our feet. The beam synchronization warning chimed. 10 minutes. Frank opened a tactical map. The survivors go to the landing field. Pellis, escort them. Pellis straightened. I am part of this team. You're also the best navigator. This facility's geometry is changing. My weapon's proficiency is terrible. It has improved. You shot me during training. You moved unpredictably. I was standing still. Pellis's veins glowed purple with indignation. Mara touched his arm. Get them out. He looked at her. The color beneath his skin softened. Do not die. I will attempt to avoid inefficiency. That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard, I said. They both stared at me. Frank slapped my helmet. Move. Pellis led the survivors away. Frank, Mara, Dr. Vale, and I advanced toward the central chamber. The dome doors had fused shut. I examined the seam. Could cut through. 6 minutes, Mara said. I stepped back. Or we use the Earth method. Dr. Vale looked worried. What is the Earth method? I fired an armor-piercing grenade into the door. The explosion removed the door, part of the wall, and several arguments against excessive force. Beyond it waited the nightmare. The central dome was much larger inside than outside. A black gate rose from the floor, its edges vanishing into darkness. The matter beam apparatus had grown around it in twisted metallic roots. Hundreds of shapes crawled over the machinery. Some wore pieces of the missing staff. Others had never possessed recognizable anatomy. Winged things without bodies. Bodies without skin. Pale giants that walked on fingers. A floating mass of eyes joined by transparent nerves. And behind the gate, something watched us. It was too large to enter. Not yet, Dr. Vale whispered. The control platform is on the far side. Frank checked his ammunition. Jack, with me. Mara, protect the doctor. Mara's rifle hummed. Asteroid doctrine discourages emotional declarations before combat. Frank looked at her. Human doctrine encourages them. She turned to me. Her controlled expression slipped. Just slightly. You have been irritating, she said. Loud, impulsive, and unnecessarily humorous. Thank you. I was not finished. She took a breath. I have also found your presence reassuring. There are moments when a man says something memorable, something dignified, something worthy of being repeated years later. I said, huh? Frank groaned. Then the monsters charged. We met them with everything we had. Frank's plasma projector turned the air orange. Mara fired precise bursts, each shot cutting through a throat, joint, or central mass. Dr. Vale stayed behind us, clutching the reversal key. I fired until my rifle overheated. A black creature leaped from the machinery. I caught it with the barrel, slammed it into the deck, and crushed its head under my boot. Earth gravity had given humanity dense bones. Earth predators had given us reflexes. Earth team sports had given us the instinct to hit strange moving objects with whatever was available. Frank disappeared beneath 3 pale shapes. I charged. One struck me across the chest. My armor cracked. I hit the floor, rolled, and fired upward. Tungsten rounds shredded it. Another wrapped 6 limbs around my shoulders. I threw myself backward. We landed hard. Something snapped beneath me. Hopefully it. Frank rose from a pile of burning bodies. Platform. We pushed forward. 20 meters. 15. 10. The giant behind the gate pressed closer. Its outline filled the darkness. I saw continents of flesh, ridges like mountain chains. An eye opened, large enough to swallow the dome. The universe seemed to tilt toward it. A voice entered my mind. Not words. A promise. No loneliness. No failure. No fear. It showed me a life in which I had never made mistakes. My father had lived. My marriage had not collapsed. The fusion accident on Titan had never happened. 6 workers I had failed to save were laughing around a table. All I had to do was stop fighting. Mara grabbed my arm. Jack! The vision shattered. Her face was inches from mine. Real. Afraid. Beautiful. Stay here, she said. I fired past her head and killed the thing descending behind her. Planning on it. We reached the platform. Dr. Vale inserted the reversal key. The console rejected it. Biometric authorization required, the system announced. Vale pressed her hand to the reader. Authorization denied. Primary director required. She stared at the display. Selin. The dead scientist. The infected scientist. The scientist we had left 2 buildings behind. The synchronization warning chimed. 60 seconds. Frank looked at the gate. The giant pushed 1 limb through. Reality cracked around it. Mara fired at the limb. Her weapon did nothing. We require Selin's biometric pattern, she said. I remembered the thing in the corridor. Remembered Dr. Selin's hand opening. Remembered the data crystal. And something else. He knew, I said. Bill looked at me. What? He knew he'd be infected. He left the crystal in his hand. I grabbed the recording device from Mara. Its casing was made of memory crystal and biometric alloy. His palm print. Dr. Vale understood. She slammed the crystal against the reader. The console flashed. Director Selin recognized. 30 seconds. Vale activated the reversal. Nothing happened. Manual matter source required, the system said. Insufficient conversion mass. Frank stared at the console. How much mass? Minimum 90 kilograms. Everyone looked at me. I weighed 96. That feels personal, I said. Mara stepped between me and the beam pad. No. Got another 90-kilogram object? Frank looked down at his armor. I'm 112. You know the system? No. I maintained industrial matter converters for 12 years. Mara's composure broke. No. The giant's limb pushed farther into the chamber. The platform buckled. I handed her my rifle. Once I enter the beam, reverse the stream. You will be disassembled. That's what matter beams do. There is no destination buffer. Then I guess I'm going somewhere interesting. She seized the front of my armor. Asteri were weaker than humans. Mara still managed to pull me down until our foreheads touched. Jack Mercer, I forbid this. That sounded emotional. I am experiencing weather. Despite everything, I laughed. Then I kissed her. It was not elegant. Our helmets struck first. We corrected. The second attempt was better. Frank cleared his throat. 20 seconds. I stepped onto the beam pad. The darkness behind the gate screamed. Not in anger. In fear. That was when I understood. Humans were products of possibility too. Every species was. Every life represented countless paths not taken, countless extinctions avoided, countless accidents survived. But DNA worlds produced something especially offensive to the creatures beyond the gate. We were the outcomes that should not have survived. Earth was a planet of catastrophes, predators, disease, impact events, climate shifts, and evolutionary arms races. Humanity was an accumulation of improbable victories. The unreal monsters had come from futures that failed to happen. We came from a future that had refused to fail. I smiled at the eye beyond the gate. Wrong universe. Mara activated the beam. Pain became light. Light became information. For one immeasurable instant, I was nowhere. Then I was everywhere. I felt the gate. I felt the creatures clinging to our reality. They were possibilities without history, hunger without memory, evolution without life. And I was Jack Mercer, son of Alan and Mary Mercer, born during a blizzard, survivor of a refinery fire, 2 divorces, 1 wrongful arrest, and 11 days of inadequate combat training. I had history. I had weight. The reverse stream took hold. The monsters screamed as the gate dragged them backward. The giant fought. I fought harder, because it had never had to crawl through snow to repair a power line at 3 in the morning. It had never held a dying co-worker's hand. It had never tried to explain a tax audit. It had never been human. The gate collapsed. The dome vanished. And I woke up naked in the reflecting pool. The first thing I saw was the ruined sculpture of social harmony. The second was Mara kneeling in the water beside me. The third was Frank, holding a medical scanner. "You dead?" he asked. "Probably." Mara touched my face. Her hand trembled. "Your reconstruction occurred through the shuttle's emergency matter buffer," she said. "Was that likely?" "No. Human luck," Frank said. Pellis stood behind them with the survivors. His veins glowed bright green with relief. The beam tower had gone dark. Across Nethra, emergency systems were coming back online. Shuttles moved over the facility. Astri rescue teams advanced cautiously from the landing field. Mara continued touching my face as though verifying each part. "You were absent for 11 minutes. Felt longer. You are entirely intact." I looked down, mostly embarrassed. She removed her coat and covered me. Frank made a note on his wrist display. "Company owes you a uniform. And hazard pay. Let's not get unrealistic." 3 weeks later, the Astri government announced that the Nethra incident had resulted from a contained matter beam malfunction. No monsters were mentioned. The missing scientists were listed as casualties of an industrial accident. Hazard Containment Solutions received a substantial payment from an account officially designated for infrastructure consultation. Dr. Lysandra Vale was appointed director of a new research commission dedicated to ensuring no one ever connected ancient probability machines to matter beams again. Pellis received a commendation for evacuating the survivors. Frank received a bill for the sculpture. Mara requested transfer to Hazard Team 4. Her official explanation stated that human-led containment doctrine, while chaotic, produced statistically valuable outcomes. Her unofficial explanation occurred in my quarters and is not relevant to this report. As for me, I remained with the company. The pay was mediocre. The equipment was secondhand. The retirement plan depended heavily on not being eaten. But the galaxy was larger and stranger than most people knew, and there were things in the dark that considered civilized worlds easy prey. They had not met enough humans. My second assignment involved an abandoned mining moon, a Varelian religious cult, and something living inside the artificial gravity system. Frank handed me the briefing as we boarded the shuttle. "Routine job," he said. Mara sat beside me, checking her rifle. Pellis's veins glowed with amusement. I opened the file. The first page showed a security image of a 6-legged human skeleton walking across a ceiling. I closed the file. "Routine," I agreed, because by then, I knew what the word meant. Sleep well, and remember that any scratching inside the walls is probably only an unresolved sensor artifact. We hope you enjoyed this story from Starlight Stories. If so, please like and subscribe.